Hello viewers at home and those of you who are tuning in online, thank you once again for tuning into the show today. My name is Chef Andy, your regular host, and on this particular episode we're going to be spicing things up, which is one of the many episodes on this ongoing series of episodes. And on this particular episode we're going to be focusing on a very simple and very vegetarian dish. We're going to be working with some butternut curry. And before we get to that part, we're going to begin by introducing the ingredients before us to give you a better knowledge and understanding of what to expect in this very show. So we're going to start at the very front with the smallest bowl at the very last end corner with about 2 to 3 pieces of cloves. You're also going to require a tablespoon of some coriander seeds, some cumin powder, about a teaspoon. You'll also require a teaspoon of fennel seeds, 1 tablespoon of some cinnamon sticks, 1 root of ginger there. You'll also require about 6 pods of cardamom. You'll require some curry powder and 1 teaspoon of mustard seeds. You'll also require about 3 to 4 cloves of garlic, 1 large teaspoon of tomato paste. You'll also require some butternut that's already been cooked. So this you can actually cook in the oven, roast them, or preferably fry them for this particular recipe. You're also going to incorporate some 2 red onions, medium size of course, some fresh peas. You'll require some 3 tomatoes, medium in size but very ripe, some fresh coriander leaves, some salt, some oil to cook with, and last but not least, some water. Now we're going to take a short break now, giving you just a bit of time to freshen up and get ready for the show. And when we come back, we're going to just dive right into it. See you after a short break. Again and welcome back. If you're just catching up with the show, we've just been finalizing the introduction of the ingredients before us, and we're right about in the last and final step, which is where we're going to prepare this beautiful dish. So very importantly, begin by heating up your pot or your pan of choice, and if you actually have one of this, very handy to use in this particular recipe. This actually helps you to break down, or rather crush down, some of this raw spices. So to begin us off, I'll start with our cloves. Also add in about half of our coriander seeds. I'll also add to that our mustard seeds. Add to that small amount of some fennel seeds, and last but not least about 3 of your cardamom pods, and proceed to break everything together. Once nicely crushed, proceed to add your raw spices to your pan, and just allow for a very small amount of time, allowing for your aromatics to really come through. Be sure to also move your pan around. This will actually help you to make sure that you don't actually burn your spices. And that should actually take about 10 to 20 seconds. You should actually be able to start getting that beautiful mixed aroma from the fennel, from the coriander. And once it's nicely, beautifully roasted, once you start getting the aromas coming through, proceed to move those to a small plate on the side. And now we're going to start by frying up our ingredients. So very importantly, begin with some oil, about a tablespoon should do. And proceed by chopping your onions. Now I'm using red onions for this recipe for their pungency. You remember you can actually substitute the onions that you use for this recipe. You can alternatively use some leeks or some spring onions. Those are also very fragrant and they give quite a very, very beautiful taste. But for the particular reason that we're looking for a bit of pungency to our dish, we're going to be working with red onions for this recipe. And for those of you who may not also be able to get your hands on some raw spices, you can actually also use some powder spices, which you should be able to find at your retail outlets. And now, just to give you a small history of the dish, this is a very, very simple and beautiful recipe, especially for those of you that are not meat eaters. Something also to mention, butternut is a very, very beautiful ingredient and a very, very nutritious one for that matter. And if you can actually be able to get your hands on some pumpkin as well in substitute for some butternut, that will also work quite well. Right, so once your onions and garlic are chopped up, proceed to add those to your pan. And using a wooden spoon, proceed to fry everything together and proceed to cook until they're nicely translucent. Next up, proceed to grate some of your ginger root. And for those of you who may also have a question about using fresh ginger as opposed to dried or powdered ginger powder, remember the beautiful thing about ingredients, they actually carry quite a bit of nutrient and flavor when you use them fresh. So if you can also substitute things like turmeric, which you can actually be able to find both fresh and in powder form, you can also go with that option. It will not make much difference to your dish, but on a cost-effective kind of scale, it will actually save you quite a bit of shillings. So we're just going to add just a little bit of oil to our pan and proceed to fry everything together. Now proceed to turn your heat a little higher. Remember, very important to control your heat at this stage, because it is very, very simple to overcook your ingredients or overcolor them, which will actually carry a very, very bitter taste right through to the last bit of your dish. So very important to make sure to actually not leave your pan unattended. Also very important to remember to continue mixing your ingredients through. That should allow for a nice, beautiful coloring. Now next up, we'll proceed to add our cumin powder, our curry powder, and our tomato paste. And you can proceed to incorporate your dried spices. And you can also incorporate just a small bit of water. That should actually help you to really break down the flavors and also help you to dissolve the tomato paste. Now we're going to proceed to add a small bit of water once more. Remember, water is a very, very good catalyst for cooling down your pan. So very, very handy to also save a bit of, or rather have a bit of water on the side. This always helps you to really get a nice combination of ingredients in your pan, and also allows for dissolving those beautiful flavors and combining that into one beautiful flavor that carries through all the spices that you'll be using. Now, for some of you who may also have noticed, we did not introduce any chili for this recipe, but remember, you can also add a bit of some green or some red chopped chilies to this dish. Remember, it will bring quite a bit of heat, so if you're going to be serving your dish to children that may not be able to consume chilies, you may actually want to avoid that and substitute it for something a little less pungent. Or also, alternatively, you can also serve your chilies on the side, and that should actually allow for you to get that nice, beautiful flavor right at the end of the dish. Right, so once that's done, we're going to proceed to chop some tomatoes. So very, very simply begin by coring the stem end of your tomato. And do the same for the second piece. Also very important, also remember, always constantly mix your ingredients in the pan. Right, now we're going to proceed to chop up our tomatoes into some 1/4 inch chunks. Just to finish that off, proceed to add your tomatoes to your pan. Remember, the best particular way to manage to get your ingredients to really marry really well, always be sure to start your process by adding your ingredients one at a time, allowing for each one to really combine in a good amount of time. And now, just to aid us in breaking up those tomatoes, we're going to proceed to add some liquid once more. Now we're going to be adding about 1/2 cup. Remember, this will take quite a bit of time to simmer through. Now just be sure to also use your spoon and the liquid to just rinse off the sides of your pan. Remember, there's quite a bit of flavor that sticks to the side there with your dried spices cooking fast. So very important to combine those. And now you can proceed to allow that to continue simmering at high heat and proceed to add your blanched peas a little much later, finishing off with your butternut. But before we get to that part, we are going to take a short break and allow that to continue simmering. But don't touch that dial. Remember, we haven't gotten to the last and final step of the dish. There is a bit of other ingredients that will be going in there, but we'll be resuming that after the short break. See you in a little while. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. If you're just catching up, we've just been finishing off our curry sauce, which is almost now thick enough. But before we finish that off, very important to incorporate the last and final ingredients, which of course we're going to begin with our steamed garden peas. Mix that through. And proceed to add your butternut. Now for the butternut, remember, very, very crucial that you actually cook this beforehand. Remember, you can actually blanch them before time, allow them to cool off, and then finish them off in your sauce just before time, just in the nick of time for lunch. You can also alternatively slice them, season with some salt and pepper, throw them in the oven and roast for anywhere between 12 to 15 minutes. They should actually be just enough, just about cooked, and you should actually now have just the last and final cooking to get them nice and tender in your pan. So very, very importantly, just mix that through. Nice, beautiful colors and aromas coming through there with the butternut addition. Now to just incorporate our last and final ingredients, we will begin by chopping up some fresh coriander. Remember, this always adds a nice, beautiful color, aroma, and balance to your dish. So you can always abstain from using a lot of many other ingredients, but especially for coriander, it's my personal favorite. And in the same line of curry preparation, remember, it's also a vital ingredient. Remember, we also used some coriander seeds earlier. Now the coriander leaves are just going to give it a nice, beautiful touch of green, and also assist in lifting quite a bit of flavor. So proceed to mix that gently right at the end. Well, of course, making sure not to break up your butternut or mash it in any way. And now for some of you who may actually want to also add a bit of richness or a bit of an oriental touch to your dish, you can actually also incorporate some coconut milk. This will actually give it a nice, beautiful finish. You can also add a lot of other ingredients, as I mentioned, so do feel free to also check out your internet, for instance. Check out all kinds of varieties. Remember, curry being a very much vital dish in India, comes from 4 different regions, and each particular region has its own touch. For this particular recipe, we're working with something very similar from the Kashmir region of India, and this is why we're actually going to finish our dish at that point. And now all that's left to do is to plate, so we're going to turn that off the heat completely. And I'm just going to pull up a plate. So remember, curry, very importantly, you can serve this with some steamed rice, you can serve it with some naan bread, you can even serve it with some chapati. Very, very good substitute to your lunches, and especially for those of you who are working on a nice spicy touch to your cooking and also looking for some beautiful vegetarian alternatives, this particular one is my personal favorite and very much my recommendation to you. So just to finish off, we're going to proceed to just scoop that and proceed to plate that right at the center of our plate. And that will give you a nice beautiful portion to share for 2, or also give you a nice big portion for an adult portion to share. And last but least, very, very important to also give a nice small hint of seasoning over the top. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my very simple take on a butternut curry. I hope you've managed to pick something you can improvise in your very own home cooking. And remember, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of varieties do come in when you're making a vegetarian curry, but remember, if you can manage to get the basics, which is basically building your sauce, incorporating your spices, you will have a very, very easy time incorporating your curry and making a very simple curry yourselves. So from the studios, I'm going to bid you farewell, wishing you a very, very beautiful holiday, and until the next episode, we're going to be wishing you a very beautiful afternoon, and God bless.